Well, hello everybody. It is lovely to be doing this both with people in the room. Yay, very lovely to have people here, an audience, and those of you who are joining us online. And this is about trying to bring voices together from across the world, in fact. And we've got 6 great guests. And over the next hour, what we're going to talk about is what climate accessibility means, what they're seeing by way of climate change, what they're trying to do about it, what they hope you might also be inspired to do about it. So it is great to have our panel here. Amaya and Freddie Sebastian are online, and I'm going to introduce them more in just a moment. Michael, Vanessa, Zareen, Farah, here with us in the room at Lucy Cavendish College, which is kindly hosting this opening event of the festival. So just to let you know a little bit about our 6 panellists, in Australia, Amaya Chula is from Wunmari in the Northern Territory. Michael Bravo is a leading expert here at Cambridge University, a geography professor, and he's also at the Scott Polar Research Institute. From Chile, Freddie Sebastian Medina is an environmental scientist, and he is driven by the desire to bring indigenous knowledge to bear on mitigating climate change. He's going to talk about that. Active here in Cambridge and a trustee of the Muslim Women's Association of Edinburgh. Welcome to Zareen Taj Islam. Farah Kassa is a law student right here at Lucy Cavendish College, and she's going to be telling us, among other things, about purposeful and African-rooted, globally oriented organisation that seeks to find and empower grassroots women's voices, women of all ages. And sitting right next to me, plant-based health coach Vanessa Sturman will, I think, help us all remember that even today we can all start doing good in small ways and also fundamental ways when you think about your diet, when you think about what you eat. So we've got a whole range of experience and kind of aptitudes and skills and knowledge, and the key is the voices. So what I'm going to try to do is actually, hopefully that'll be the most you hear of my voice in a run through the hour. I'm going to just for a few minutes for each of our panelists talk to them about what climate accessibility means to them. So we'll go through them, but then we're going to open up a collective conversation. And I can't see what you may be seeing in the Zoom meeting. Antoinette will let me know, I think, if anything pops up. But we'll welcome also questions, observations, resonances from the room that we're in. So Amaya, I'm just going to twist around, see, I can see you. Amaya, tell us a little bit about who you are to begin with, and welcome.
Thank you. I absolutely love hearing your voice. So nice. I'm 19 years old and I'm from the Northern Territory. I've been in Bright for about 5 years. I'm doing VCE. VCE is the Victorian Certificate. Victorian Certificate of Education. And I'm on a leadership program where I try to learn to work in 2 worlds. So in this world and my culture. And it's been hard so far, but I'm trying to navigate ways around things. But yeah. And I like to do a lot of things. I want to become a marine biologist. I'm working my way towards it because I'm just very fascinated by the ocean. And that's pretty much about me.
Amaya, tell us something about the differences you're seeing with climate change. I mean, even when you're talking about, tell us about the nesting habits of turtles. That's one way in which you, I think, are seeing differences.
Yes, I'm sorry. I'm just a bit. I'm really nervous. I when I'm nervous, I say a lot.
We love hearing you. We love hearing you, and really appreciate you. Being with us on your evening.
Thank
there.
you so much.
So just tell us a little bit about what you're seeing. I mean, turtles is an example that I've heard. For example, just one example.
yeah, that's one example of many that I've seen from my lifetime, and I'm only 19, which is a huge concern for me. But with turtles and like their nestings, turtles usually like to lay their eggs during the day. So at night they don't, they have more predators out and stuff that are out to hunt them and whatnot. Um, and in the last couple of years, turtles haven't been able to do that because of how hot the sands are. Um, and that's one thing is it's too hot for them, which it shouldn't be. The sand shouldn't be that hot, to the point where the turtles aren't laying the eggs and then disrupting the uh turtles nature's cycle. Yeah, like it shouldn't be to the point where they're not able to do that anymore because of how hot the sands are. That's one thing that I found really concerning. Yeah.
Amaya, thank you. We'll come back to you. I'm just going to introduce other members of the panel as well. Stay with us. I'm going to move next to Michael. I think you have many titles. Michael, you're head of the Circumpolar History and Public Policy Research Group at the Scott Polar Research Institute, a member of the Geography Department's Society and Environment Research Group, a fellow at Downing College. We were just talking about bringing up kids at this time as well, that there's all sorts of ways in which we relate to climate change, but what matters most to you?
Thank you. Well, Cambridge is very good at producing titles, but as you said, first of all, thank you for allowing me to be part of the festival. And I think it's amazing, isn't it, having people from diverse backgrounds in Australia, in Chile, Jordan, many different forms of affiliation. And so for me, climate actually begins with relationships. And I hope that the challenge of having diverse voices is to bridge those. So I think in thinking about the question of access and accessibility, we have to find ways in which questions of how we relate to the environment, and we have a lawyer amongst us, about the right to environment, in some way needs to be brought home to how we relate to each other in a very complex world.
Because up to now, and you're part of this, there has been a struggle to say to the world and the policymakers and the people in power, look, it's an existential challenge, this really matters. Okay, so we've got there, but then you don't want it to be a closed conversation.
No, that's exactly right. It's so easy for the conversations to be closed down, I think, and hence one of the kind of the beautiful aspects of having conversations curated about access is at least reopens the opportunity for diverse voices. And so, as you say, if this is an existential crisis, that seems to be the case, how do we imagine existential crises in a way that relate, where people's voices and experiences are so diverse? And to me, the quick answer to that is it comes back to understanding how we're connected to each other, relations of interconnection, both through human relationships, but through human nature relationships as well.
Michael, thank you. And we'll come back to you as well. I'm just moving the microphone here. And just to pick up on Michael's thought there, last week I was chairing something we call Climate Creatives, BBC and broadcaster led conference. And we had Russell T. Davies on, the screenwriters behind so many hits, and he was saying the way to engage through storylines is through the human heart. It's through relationships. It's through your audiences caring, and it's that thing of the first rule of talking about climate is don't preach. Oh, there are many first rules actually, but that was one of them. Engaging people where they are, which leads me to go to Chile. We're going to bring in Freddie Sebastian now. And Freddie, you're going to introduce yourself more, but just to say, let our audience know that you are from Arica in Chile, belonging to the Aymara indigenous people. You've done a lot of study, a lot of academic work in France. Let's see, BSc, University of Poitiers, your MSc at the Sorbonne, your MA at the Paris Institute of Political Studies, and you were an observer, I think, at the COP21 process in Paris in 2015. Freddie Sebastian, rather than me telling the audience what you're about, would you tell us about your collaboration now, the work you're doing, which aims to bring Indigenous knowledge to climate science? And welcome.
Aski Sumauru, which in Aymara language means good morning, everybody. Nayak Sutinach, Freddy Sebastian. Oh, yeah, my name is effectively Freddy Sebastian. And well, Indigenous peoples and local communities are the most vulnerable sectors of the civil society to get touched by the consequences of the climate emergency. In this context, it is so urgent as the IPCC report of April 2022 have said it's necessary to include the ancestral or indigenous knowledge for protecting endemic or native ecosystem, which are many of them inside ancestral territories, as in the Amazon forest, as in the Andean flatlands, where I am right now in the village of Putre, in the region of Arica and Parinacota in the northern of Chile, and in the border with Peru and Bolivia also, by the way. And by integrating this ancestral knowledge to the science approach, I'm sure we could formulate new approaches which will be stronger in order to mitigate climate change, but also to offer new tools and approaches to communities more adapted to their way of life in order to adapt at the same time to climate change consequences. So beyond the academic fields, which are also very important, I think the most relevant is to integrate the ancestral knowledge from indigenous peoples with the scientific knowledge. But where to integrate, in which sector? Well, I think education must be this platform where we can do this gathering or this integration between science and indigenous knowledge. And then from this, sure, we can have a very important clues in order to form or to ideate, to create environmental policies as in the international way, national way, and most local level. So I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
So Freddie Sebastian, when you talk about action at local levels, can you give us an example of a tool or something that you would like to see change that could make a difference?
Well, I would like to relate a little bit with our way to do consumption. For example, when we like to eat tatties, which you mentioned in the United Kingdom, in Scotland, you say tatties, or French fries, or in Belgium is les frites. Everybody have been eat this these French fries. Where they come from South America, as you know, and how are they produced? Well, in these lands, in the nearby the Andean flats and other specific parts, moreover in Peru and the Chiloé island in Chile. When you produce the cultive, when you do the crops of potatoes, you have to use water, territory, and so on. By the indigenous point of view, or the indigenous approach of the Aymara people, you can see they use the territory, even the hills, they adapt with a kind of stairs. So they using as environmental friendly the area of the crop. They also use the water resource um, very strategically without being engineers. And then that is associated to different celebrations or rituals, kind of rituality. For example, for starting the season, we call that Pachayampe ritual. And then even in the harvest time, the potatoes could be lyophilized, um, as we call papa chuño or chuño potato, which are a kind of potato. They dried it without irritation, and it could resist like that by 1 decade. So you can imagine how much carbon dioxide you could save for producing, because you don't need a refrigerator system, so you're not releasing greenhouse gases during 10 years at least. So this is one specific kind of crop or kind of ancestral knowledge and practices from Aymara people in order to reduce the carbon footprint. And on the other hand, when we buy the French fries on the supermarket, or we have to refrigerate it first, and we are consuming electricity and also releasing CO2 to the atmosphere. So this is one of very specific examples.
And that's great. I never imagined we'd be talking about turtles and French fries, and that's just for starters, because it affects every aspect of the way we live. And in fact, Freddie, Sebastian, thank you for that example. And I'm going to bring it back to Vanessa Sturman, in fact, who's with us, because you're talking about your health coaching is plant-based. My understanding is that you're not saying everybody must be vegan, but you want us to think about what we eat and the consequences. I should say about Vanessa as well that you got your BA from Cambridge University, your MPhil, and I think you've offered advice about plant-based eating on many different national networks, but it's great that you're here with us today. So tell us a little bit, Vanessa, about what for you climate accessibility means, this debate, this conversation.
Yeah, thank you. Now, ironically, I'm a health coach with a croaky voice, so please excuse me. First of all, with accessibility, it's got to be doable, and it's got to be doable and interesting for everyone. Obviously, we in this room understand why it's important, but what about everyone else who might be busy, have no money, might be dealing with a lot of other things going on in their lives? So in terms of doable, what are the things that can be built into the everyday life? And I think not enough people are talking about the link with food. So you don't necessarily have to go on a march or write a letter to Parliament. What can you do walking into your supermarket? Could that be choosing chickpeas over the chicken, for example? That's something everyone can do. So it's got to be that doable side. And then I think the other side that's really, really important, and also picking up on what you say, you don't have to be, this is not about everyone going 100% vegan. That's another part of it being doable. What changes can I make immediately that might just be a very simple swap? Any change you make is going to benefit the environment as well as your health. But in terms of what we're going through as a country, health-wise, we have so many issues and crises around cardiovascular disease, obesity, gut health, all of these issues that can also be solved with a healthy plant-based diet. Again, you don't have to do it 100%. Remembering, for example, that our good gut bacteria feed off fiber, they feed off plants. That's what they eat. The more plants we put in our body, the healthier we're going to be. And then lastly, making it accessible is about it being fun and enjoyable. So it doesn't have to be bland salad, and it absolutely shouldn't be. It can be a delicious tofu korma. It can be a delicious bean burger with guacamole and French fries, or whatever else you want to have. And you know, if you love cake, there's a plant-based version of every cheesecake and chocolate cake you can possibly imagine. So it's got to mean something for you in your life as well. I can benefit by being more healthy. It's not going to cost me too much because I can choose chickpeas, and whole foods are not too expensive. And guess what? I can enjoy myself as well.
I like that. We can enjoy ourselves as well. We'll come back to you as well, Vanessa, but we've gone through French fries and chocolate cake. We didn't expect that. And we want to talk about what can be done in our communities. And Zareen Taj Islam, I'm speaking to you both as a Cambridge resident who has been very involved in local campaigns to do with COP26 and I presume COP27 as well, but you're also a trustee of the Edinburgh Women's Muslim Association. You've got a long history of talking to people in ways that they relate to, of engagement. So what does climate accessibility mean to you?
Well, I used my position in Edinburgh. I was a chair of Radio Ramadan Edinburgh, so I was the producer of a programme called Talking Heads. So we would use that to introduce the community in Ramadan to climate issues. We had Fazlan Khalid from IFES, that's Islamic Foundation for Environment, Ecology, Sciences. Difficult to remember. So we started quite early to try and engage the community because it's actually not, it's a no-brainer because Muslims are supposed to be stewards of the earth. Everything that's on the earth around us is of value and we're supposed to help maintain it. All corruption on the planet is caused by us, so we have to counter that. So that's from when I was a child, that's what I would read, that we are the stewards of the earth. So that wasn't difficult to engage Muslims with that kind of message. But with the Muslim Women's Association, when I was chair of that, I realized that we were combating isolation of women, depression, and people needing, being lonely, not being able to get out. So we started to reclaim our spaces. So I think it's really important to work with the community and use our spaces that we have. So we found organisations we could do walks with in the countryside, in the woodlands, along the canal. So people who'd lived in Edinburgh for 30 years had never seen these parts of Edinburgh because they didn't know you could use cycleways. So cycleways can be used by pedestrians. That's the important part, and we should use them. And then in Cambridge, the kind of work we're doing is supporting global issues that we've heard about, but also local things. Our chalk stream is drying up. There's Pakistan having its floods. This is the worst one. In 2010, when we were Radio Ramadan, we were sending aid boxes free from PIA. We got the aid boxes to Glasgow and sent them in 2010. This is worse this year, the floods. And here in Cambridge, our chalk stream's drying up. River Cam is in danger of drying away. And as Amaya was saying, in her young life, she's seen a change with the turtles. My son was so distressed to realize that the ditches he was walking along on his walks were actually the chalk streams dried up. They were the dried up rivulets that feed the River Cam. So we're seeing it in our lifetime, and I'm using whatever platforms I have to engage our community, to work with people. And our Muslim Women's Association is affiliated with Friends of the Earth Scotland, and it's affiliated with SCOTE3. So that's 3 E's: employment, environment, energy. So involving the community, involving workers in the just transitions, so that the North Sea oil workers aren't just abandoned and their families, they are retrained. And it's totally possible. In the 70s, there was a Lucas plan. It's totally possible to use people and their ideas and their skills to transition to a greener future.
Thank you so much. And Farah, I'm going to come on to you and make you wait just one more minute, because when you talked there, Zareen, about being a steward of the earth, I wanted to come back to Amaya. We still have you with us, Amaya? Yes. because I think you want to do some work in your gap year as a ranger. Is that right? Which also strikes me as somebody who is a steward of our earth. But tell us a little bit about what the rangers do.
Well, the rangers in my community do a lot of things with working on country, what they call it. And working on country is basically just working on the environment. And they do a lot of things from picking up rubbish that are just left on the side of the road to trying to help with the sea turtles, and a lot of other things that don't come up to mind at the moment. And I really want to do this so I could get a bit of experience before going to uni and studying marine biology. But I also want to do it because I want to see it firsthand, just how much they do, because I don't think a lot of people realize that the rangers do so much for us, in terms of being not a vessel, but something really helpful with helping with the environment and stuff. And I also want to work for them in my gap year because they do a lot of on-country stuff, like I said, and I want to be able to go into country more, because in my culture we believe that listening to earth, the listening to nature is very good, not only for yourself, but in terms of what nature needs from you as a person and as people. And two of the main reasons why I want to work for them. Yeah.
Amaya, thank you. And Amaya and Freddie Sebastian do stay with us, but I want to introduce our audience now to Farah. I'm going to move the microphone over. But just to say, Farah Casa deserves a special welcome, I think, because she stepped in at the very last moment, because Dr. Gabriel Okello is unfortunately unwell. But Farah is a second-year law student here at Lucy Cavendish. Great to have you here. And I know just from the little bit I've learned about you that you are very much about grassroots and about activism and about going out there. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you did before coming to Cambridge and how you're involved now? I'm just going to move the mic towards you, Farah.
Absolutely. So first of all, thank you for having me at this festival. This is a huge honor, and especially it's in my college, my home. So this is very amazing for me. So before coming to Cambridge, I took a gap year, and during that gap year, I volunteered at a women's rights organization back home called the Arab Women's Organization of Jordan. And that was an amazing and fulfilling experience for me because I was able to go to rural and remote areas in Jordan and talking to rural women who work in the informal sector of the economy. So agricultural workers, some of them work with soaps, they create soaps, they handcraft, like they do mixes of herbs. So very much informal sector of the economy. And the very disappointing thing about that is that they are not eligible to have social security or healthcare, which was very prominent, which is a very important aspect for people to have, especially during COVID. And so when we went to our visits post-COVID, just months after, we really saw the ramifications of this policy on rural women. What we've seen is that women could not go to their fields. They don't have access to their crops. They couldn't harvest. They couldn't do anything. The government would sometimes not supply, water plants to kind of water their grounds and their fields, which was quite disappointing because again, women play a very pivotal role in natural resource management, and we can really see the importance of it because of the very, very staggering paradigm shift between going back to primary sector types of work.
And so, as water supplies become harder to get hold
absolutely,
of, it's going to become more and more of a challenge.
And it's not so that because Jordan faces water scarcity at a very dire level. we don't have much water resources back in Jordan, so we could really see the dire effects that that had on women who work on the ground, and they face other problems as well. Safe working environments. Sometimes the owner of the land threatens the women who work on the land as well. So it's like it's a nexus between very, very vast number of problems and of small, yeah, it's just very disheartening to see how women who are literally trying to just make ends meet face all of these, blocked doors in front of them, and they have no access to whatever resources that they need to go to their fields, to harvest their crops, and to even have safe working environments. So that's what we really touched upon when we went to our local visits, and we heard what they had to say. We devised policy papers and we presented them to Parliament, and we're still waiting on, having these women who work in the informal sector of the economy have their basic rights, such as social security and healthcare.
And you're also working, I think, now as an advisor to Purposeful,
Yes.
which strikes me about giving heart to women's organisations, but also getting them funding. I mean, we're talking about practicalities here.
Yes. So Purposeful is a African-rooted but globally oriented organization, and they have created this initiative called With and for Girls. And so the entire aim, the entire essence of it is girls supporting girls. So we work on a regional basis. So what we do is I'm an advisor, so we collect applications from groups and collectives in the Arab states, and we assess them and we give them flexible funding. So we don't really, we're not very strict when we give funding, because we really want to support young women who create initiatives, who help young women back, adolescent girls as well. So through flexible funding, which is the entire purpose of this initiative, we really hope we can see a change in how the quality of life of women, young women, adolescent girls is going to improve.
And can I just ask you, and maybe I'll see if there's any thoughts from the audience on this as well. What does it mean to have a climate change festival in Cambridge?
It's very important, I believe, because again, it's all about accessibility. And I think, as Vanessa said, it has to be doable, it has to be there. And I think because it's hosted in a very prestigious institution, it can really reach places. People can hear about this. It's accessible to people on various platforms. It's very important for people to engage in this type of conversation, this kind of discourse, to see the maximum impact that us as an institution can give, because we do have the resources, we do have the scholars, we do have, the opinions, the minds. So it's very important to use these resources in the places that need to be implemented in.
Thank you very much, Fran. Thank you for stepping in and waiting. Thank you very much. Michael, can I just ask you at that point about, this is a bit cumbersome, isn't it? But it's getting the voices heard, isn't it? Just about whether things are changing in terms of people being ready to talk about the issue and engage with it and fund research. That's a big question, isn't it?
Isn't it? Well, I think much is changing, and I think the conversations we're having here are so interesting because they highlight both engagement on a local level, and they also highlight partnerships. And I think problems get solved increasingly through relationships and partnerships. Barry, you gave some very good examples there. So that seems to me kind of the way forward. In terms of how things are changing, I mean, on the one hand, there's sort of the big picture story. There is a climate emergency. I think how people imagine and relate to this very notion of climate is perhaps changing because of, so for example, with extreme weather events and the science of attribution, we're beginning to say, well, these storms you've experienced are linked through science to climate change. So I think that also means around the world, there is a concrete change of experience where maybe 10 years ago, people would have said, well, you can experience the weather, but climate is something that scientists might abstract and is less accessible. I think climate is becoming more accessible because of its kind of the conversations and the experience of extreme weather. And And one might say, well, that's certainly important. And that might help crystallize and mobilize on some macro political level the recognition of the seriousness of climate change. But then one needs to ask, in what way does that help with solutions to climate change? And what I hear from my fellow panelists is it comes back to actually the kinds of projects and engagement and understanding where we learn to live better, more effectively with nature. So I'm hoping that's the case. In the polar regions where I worked, for example, for some time, Inuit, indigenous peoples, also very close, intimate relationships with the land, particularly with water and sea ice. The activist Sila Klute talks about the right to cold because ice is a place of living, of habitation. And yet when I think we also want to think about cities. What does the right to environment mean? And we're turning down we're stopping using electricity and gas because of price at the moment. And that's pretty interesting to reflect on. Because when we turn on the aircon in the world's major cities, we're drawing down on the world's cold reserves, in my opinion. But how does that relationship get realized? How does someone feel like when I switch on the aircon comfort when I'm not in the house, I'm depleting the ice resources of the polar regions? So one of the things that I think the conversation we're doing is really good at is how we move registers between this kind of global picture of here's what the climate emergency is, but actually really concrete actions about how we relate and make a difference.
Yeah, thank you. We have talked quite a lot about the concrete, haven't we? The what can be done and what can be done now and locally. Freddie Sebastian, if I can bring you in again, just your reflection on what you're hearing and the direction of our conversation, because part of what we're trying to talk about here is the voices that aren't heard or the wisdom that isn't being tapped. And I'd just like to hear your thoughts at this point.
Thank you. Well, I think one important element to notice among all the fascinating interventions that I'm hearing, I'm listening very carefully, it is about inclusion, integration in a social way. In a social way, it will be always linked to economics and also policies. So more than an answer, I have a central question right now I would like to share with you. In order to include women, which is a sector very touched by climate change and these extreme weather effects in Africa, also in South America, moreover in indigenous communities, and also the low resources population. I think the most important to ensure is the well use of the natural resources, as there was mentioned, water, ice. We have to conserve it in the Arctic and the Antarctic region, and also in the Andean mountains. But we also have to ensure food and in good quality for people, for everybody, which
We are
to be sorting in a sustainable way. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, just a brief glitch there, but do finish your point. We can still hear and see you.
Okay, my question is to how we can ensure the food distribution and connect it with a health diet and also low carbon and available for all.
Freddie Sebastian, thank you, and do both stay with us online. We might not be physically with you, but we're very aware and want to go back and forth a little bit. Vanessa, do you want to pick up a bit on that?
Yes. So what was the full question? what's the connection with the healthy diet? Apologies.
Yeah, and
I didn't
again, it's
hear.
coming back as Freddie Sebastian did before, isn't it? To the land, to crops, to agriculture, to the systems that we kind of rely on.
Yeah, I think what might be important to point out, because sometimes I think the connection isn't seen enough with the food system as to why we want to eat more plant foods. So can I do something just very interactive, just very quickly? How many land animals a year do you think we have to feed and water for human consumption? And just shout out a number, just to give this connection. I think it's really important.
Let's start the bidding. Any ideas?
So encourage people online as well to.
Oh, and online,
Yeah.
please type in the
Yeah,
chat.
yeah,
How many
yeah.
land animals a year do you think we consume, and they have to be fed and watered with crops? Millions.
40,000.
40,000.
Globally.
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 100 million.
Ah,
All right.
Going
a million.
All right. So that was the best answer. It's about 70 billion. 70 billion land animals a year. So just to make that connection, they have to eat. They eat plants. So most of the land for farming is used to feed these animals, and they also need land. They also need water. The crops they eat need water. So say we just decided to feed, and this is not about saying, like I said, that everyone's got to go 100% vegan, but say we massively reduce that and we use that land, those crops, that water for us instead, the impact on the environment is going to be absolutely huge. We'll have more forests, all those things that are going to help the climate. So that's something on accessibility.
Yeah, and biodiversity as well. Also, obviously, comes into this hugely.
Everything. And then on the side of the healthy diets, so that's a huge benefit anyone can get, regardless, like I said, just from starting to make those very small switches, getting more fiber into the diet, which is going to help people with everything from their gut issues, obesity, energy levels. So many people are suffering with high level or low level health problems, which can be solved by getting more nutrients into our diet, more fiber into our diet, and really looking after the gut as well.
There are so many different questions because all strands of our lives are affected by this. And I just wondered if there's anything, observation, comment from the audience. Antoinette, let me know if there's anything that's popped up in. Are we asking chat or
Chat or Q&A.
Yeah, if chat or Q&A, if anything comes up. But does anyone want to have a question, bringing in more voices potentially, or an observation, or is everyone feeling shy? Go. Yes,
So,
but also do feel free to wave at us.
We've talked a lot about food consumption, but there's also the point of consumerism. And as the global north, we have a real responsibility about how much we consume, and at the price of the global south. You know, they have to pay for all the things we are consuming. So in a small way, Muslim Women's Association have sewing groups to show women how to repair things, adjust clothes, reuse. Here in Cambridge, we have similar things. It's free shop, so you swap clothes, swap items, and really push against the consumerism. The fashion industry is probably the worst industry in the global north. We basically employ slave labor to clothe people. So we can push back as individuals on that, and it can be an act of real rebellion not to go and buy something, go and make something instead. And with food, I have food intolerances. I can't eat chickpeas. So it becomes very difficult very quickly to do things, as a whole, like all of us together. So we have to look at people's disabilities, their food intolerances, things like that. We can make a world that's better for everyone if we live sensibly. I think it's over consumerism is really the issue in the global north.
There's a lot about changing habits, isn't there? And just thinking back to the commissioners' debate that I was involved in last week, and it was talking to the commissioners of Channel 4, Channel 5, BBC, ITV, Netflix about what they're doing about sustainability. And there were all sorts of things like, electric cars, trying to film locally or virtually, not using diesel generators for the makeup trucks in Bridgerton, it's now hydrogen powered. I mean, all these things make a difference. And something that got reaction on social media was the Channel 5 head of commissioning saying presenters should wear, news presenters, which is the job that I've had for a long time, should wear the same clothes on air, several days in a row. I was thinking, that's just so little. It's almost too little to mention, but it matters. It's be seen to be recycling, re-upping, reusing. Just because it's about big policy decisions, isn't it? But it's also about habit formation. I don't know, Farah, you're the youngest on our panel, so I'm coming to you with that thought about whether conversations are being had about being environmentally friendly, or it's just more in the culture now. Is it? What do you think?
Well, because
I'm making you speak for all 20-year-olds. Sorry.
Oh, absolutely. It's quite interesting because we have these conversations here in the UK with my friends who are, they're from this, they're from the UK, Europe, but we don't have them back home in the Middle East, which is very interesting. I mean, when I do kind of these cross-cultural, influences with myself, we can see how prioritization is such a big aspect when it comes to these conversations, because back home, unfortunately, climate change, adapting to this new changing climate, combating it, it's just not on any policy paper. It's not talked about. It's not a priority, and I don't think some governments can see that this is one step closer to even a bigger disaster. However, here it's such a big and imminent. It's a very pivotal part of conversations that we have every day. We see them all around us. I mean, when I first came to the UK, we don't have recycling bins back home. We just throw everything away. We don't know anything about waste management substantially. So the conversation here is much more nuanced. It's much more out there, and it's a habit. Now, when I just know, I didn't know where to throw things when I first came here. Where should I put things? But now it's become a habit, as you said. It's about forming habits, and I think to start implementing these things in different parts of the world, conversations must be started. Small policies must be implemented. I mean, surely a small budget can be implemented in having an extra bin in our streets back home.
But that's talking about government intervention and political will. But as far as the people are concerned in the Global South, they've always reused and recycled very inventively. In India, from my mum's childhood, you didn't waste things. So that the people do it, that's their life, and that's a social class issue. So the poor people are the best at reusing, reducing, recycling. Make, do, amend is the phrase here. And in Rwanda, when they had all the genocide and the women were left to rebuild the country, they rebuilt it on eco issues. So make the public transport accessible and cheap for all, and political will comes as a necessity when Rwanda was being rebuilt, but the people do it all the time. All the poorer people of the Global South of this country are the ones that are the best at understanding what it really costs to live life, and we just don't have the political will. But you're right that it's the leaders that have to listen to us. That's what COP26 failed on. That's what COP27 is going to fail on. So it's up to us to push the agenda.
I agree with you, because it is within our culture to kind of reuse everything around us. We just need that push from governments, from policymakers to help us implement what we have as a culture into something that's legitimate, especially for industrial waste as well.
Antoinette's just pointed out, sorry, those of you online, I can't see the screen, but we've got a comment here that's come in, and Amaya, it's a response to something you said, so I'm going to read it to you and to our audience. Your question about listening to nature and going one step further and asking, what can I do to help, has really resonated with me, says this member of the audience. Often thinks about nature as they're walking the dog, but never thought to ask, what can I do to help? your statement has prompted me to be more mindful. And Amaya, actually, your personal journey has been so incredible. I was thinking, you in Australia have moved from the northwest to the southeast, about as far across Australia as you could possibly go, and you're just getting started. What's your sense about how much you want to influence other people? I feel like there's this drive in you.
I definitely want to influence people for the good. Um, I don't think anyone can really, in terms of influencing and stuff with other people, I don't think you can only do what you can do, and then people respond to that however they want it. You can't control how much you would like to. And with that, it's really hard because with my answers, I'm trying to think about what I would do in the community, and in terms of influencing them to become more environmentally friendly. But it's also really hard because I've done that before, and the response I've always gotten from the people in my community was always, stop trying to whitewash us. And it's like, no, I'm not trying to, the world's dying, let's try to do something about it. And they've actually made me realize something that I haven't for a while. And it's that, and I can't stress this enough, that nature's gonna survive with or without our help. Like, everything comes from it. We come from it. Every materialistic thing the world has right now comes from it. And realistically, if you actually think about it, we're only environmentally friendly and trying to save the planet for selfish reasons. We're only doing it for ourselves. We're trying to save us humans. We're not doing it because we actually care. I don't think enough for the environment, because as people, as human beings now, and I'm not trying to be rude or anything, but we are so far removed from that. As people, we are so far removed to the point where we wear shoes, for example, like we wear shoes and stuff. We can't feel nature like that. We have other ways to calm down. I mean, I'm guilty. I listen to music to calm down when I'm not having a good day or anything. And just little many things like that. Instead of connecting back with nature, for things like it just, yeah. So I try so much to influence other people, but I also try to practice what I preach with, what I mean? Like, I don't know how to explain it, but it's like basically just practice what you preach. And I try to do that as much as often, but a lame excuse, I'm human. So I did make that mistake. Not mistake, let's not call it a mistake. I do go down that path where I do listen to music, or I do wear shoes, or I do get a coffee on takeaway cups, and not takeaway, sorry, takeaway cups, and it's just many things like that. And I always, because I always say, like, oh, you should do this, or people, oh, we should do this, and then it's me doing the exact same thing, and it's like, woman, please practice what you preach. Sort of thing. So as far as influencing other people, I think you have to first influence yourself from within and try to find that connection you personally have to nature, to then influence and inspire other people to try and get on board with you.
Amaya Chula, thank you very much. That's really inspiring. And the reminder that we're all fallible, we're all human. Nobody's going to get everything right. I mean, just nobody. I think that's really important. And Freddie, Sebastian, Medina, I could see you nodding during part of what Amaya was saying there. I would just like to ask you for a kind of closing thought before we bring this session to a close.
I really think we all can do things. The point is to ask ourselves where I am, who I am, in order to know how can I do concretely. In my case, um, I with a group of sisters and brothers who are also indigenous. We have formed the Chilean Indigenous Forum on Climate Change, and we're working with our communities in order to um, do the ancestral practices with people in order to do ecological conservation and then to contribute to climate change mitigation. That's what can I do in this moment. And the more we do, as it was said, climate change mitigation, it's about also relationships. I totally agree. I would like to share with you the first sunlights here in the village of Putre, and also say just one word about Monsieur Professor Bruno Latour, who passed away last Sunday, and he teach me at the Institute of Political Science of Paris much about political science and how to use it to conserve ecosystems and nature.
Freddie, Sebastian, thank you very much for being with us, and Amaya as well. And Michael, this is what you were saying about relationships. Like, I have a sense of, even in this hour, kind of thoughts having lodged, ideas and relationships being built up. We are literally, I'm a trained journalist. We're literally in the last 2.5 minutes, but I just want to invite a sentence or two from each of you. Michael, I'm going to come to you.
Thank you. But just to build on that, thinking about just transitions, which is sort of the umbrella for fairness, equality, and access. Again, what I celebrate about this festival and about the opportunity in this panel is to broaden or shift the focus of conversation from something which is traditionally so centered in the global north. And they are steps to imagine what a more inclusive set of conversations looks like, where the global north and the global south is not only spoken about, but we have voices from the global south. And I just say, I know from the teaching that I do in the university in the last year or two, when I've done more to introduce voices from the global south, the students really respond, they love it, and they say, we want more.
So hopeful, isn't it? Thank you. Vanessa, a final thought.
Yeah, so I think on the support side, and talking about support and relationships, there's huge amounts of support out there on health, great plant-based recipes, making that fun, flavorful, all of those things. Follow some people on Instagram. You're of course welcome to follow me, but there's many, many other people out there talking about this than me, and many wonderful recipes and support, and people you can also reach out to get even more help with things like your health and eating. But just a reminder on the relationship side, food does bring us together, and the food of any culture can be made plant-based, whether that's a 4-bean chili, or whether that is like, a wonderful burger and fries, like I said, or a brilliant pizza with cashew cheese on it. So let it still bring you together and build those wonderful relationships.
Okay, next time it's going to have to be a lunch. Right, thank you.
All the events I organise food for sure. So in Cambridge, you have the wonderful Europe's first eco mosque, Cambridge Central Mosque down the end of Mill Road. I'm a lead tour guide there. And that is an example of people power in an age of austerity. 10,000 separate donations came together to get that £23 million building built, zero emissions building. That is people power. That wasn't a government initiative. That's not a planning, vision for Cambridge. So we can do it. People can do it.
And Farah.
I just want to again touch upon everything everyone has already said, making communities come together, starting campaigns, initiatives to it's hard to combat climate change. It's a very difficult process, but the small campaigns, the small initiatives that brings communities together is one step closer to achieving what everyone has in mind as well.
Well, thank you. Thank you all for taking part. here and afar, and a general lesson coming through to me, even as I talk, is that it's better to be on receive than transmit. And there's so much that has come into the room and come into the conversation even in the space of an hour. So it feels like a good way to start this festival. And thank you to Cambridge Zero for doing this too. Thank you all for being with us online.